Hey, everybody. Welcome back to On Call Medicine Podcast. I am Dr. Todd, one half of the dynamic duo that is On Call Medicine, with my good friend Phil. Phil, how are you?
Doing great. Great to be here. Folks, thanks for joining us. Whether you're coming back after watching a few episodes or joining us for the first time, we're glad you're here.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. And, today's topic is one that I am excited about because it's a little bit off the beaten path. One of the things, and I mentioned this in some of our earlier episodes, one of the things I wanted this channel or this show to be about was really just a wide variety of topics, not just healthcare, but maybe even social topics, psychosocial topics, even getting into some just really abstract things that, because at the end of the day, that's real life. Things aren't always cut and dry by the book. And so today's topic, I think, is going to really encompass that.
I think so. And I think it's good for us to be able to take detours like this because it gives us an ability to really cover a lot of different necessary topics that maybe you don't directly address when just primarily dealing with medical field.
For sure. So I think with that, let's get into the topic. So today's topic is, why people ultimately give up on their dreams. And then sort of piggybacking on that is how do we maintain some of that momentum in the face of adversity? Because let's face it, we're going to face lots and lots of adversity. With anything worth doing is going to come with challenges. So how do we fight that? How do we stay motivated? And how do we ultimately not give up on our dreams? So with that, Phil, I have a personal question to ask you. Going back to your youth, when you were a strapping young lad.
The wee little fella.
That's right. Growing up in the Highlands. Tell me, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, growing up in the Highlands, I definitely wanted to be a sword fighter. No, I'm just kidding. As a kid, I didn't have as much of a clear path. I thought maybe I'd want to play video games. Now, bear in mind that back then, this was like 8-bit, 16-bit video game days. So there was no YouTube channels about kids playing video games. But I thought maybe I could, do something with video games. I really loved them. Maybe even computer or video game development, because I liked computers as a kid as well. I didn't learn to appreciate athletics until a later age. So although I didn't have something directly as a youth, I will say that as a young to middle-aged adult, a dream of mine actually was, believe it or not, getting involved with radio, voiceover work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, for me, I definitely had aspirations of joining a podcast. No, I'm kidding. These weren't a thing back then. No, I think I had some of the typical dreams. I wanted to be a professional athlete. I played sports as a kid, and I thought I was good enough. In which we know that the overall percentage of people who end up making it to that level is something astronomically low, and so it wasn't going to happen for me. But I enjoyed it. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And actually, I suppose my first, we'll say maybe more legitimate goal was actually to be a dentist. Interestingly. And I really had frankly, the reason was because my best friend growing up, his aunt was a dentist, and I thought it sounded cool. So I really didn't have any direct knowledge of it, but and then it wasn't until actually when I went into college, I actually was not in college to be a doctor, to be a physician. It was the furthest thing from my mind. Actually, I was in school to be a teacher. It wasn't until my third year of college that I actually switched majors and went into the more pre-med route to do this, so to become a physician. So I think the idea behind there, perhaps the intro there, is dreams can change, right? Goals can change.
Absolutely.
But I think the other thing too is to recognize the difference between what might be, say, a childhood fantasy, like becoming a Major League Baseball player. Although for some, clearly they do, right? We tune in and watch them play.
Absolutely.
But the difference between a fantasy and a dream, right? Because those are two different things in my estimation. A fantasy is one that is detached from reality. It doesn't recognize the struggle. It doesn't recognize the sacrifice that it takes to achieve that. This is why we like going to the movies. This is why movies are so popular, cinema, TV, because we get to it sort of becomes that fantasy, like, for 2 or 3 hours we get to step into the lead character role, and we don't have to worry about the dangers that come with doing that. We're safe from our seat with our popcorn and our drink. And as contrast that to a dream, a dream has the potential to become a reality. If the proper steps are taken, and if the motivation is there, and if the one is there, that can become, in fact, a reality. So that a dream takes into account, your character, so to speak, who you are, your strengths,
Your perseverance.
Exactly. It takes all of those into account, but it remains attached to reality, and it appreciates those challenges that we have to face, and it's transcendent, right? As we hit that, as we reach the top of the peak of that mountain we're climbing, it opens up that vastness of other peaks and other hills to climb, and when we're striving for something, that's part of the process. And so, today, that was my thought as we talked about today's episode, right? Of why do people give up on some of those dreams, and what are some of the more common challenges they face. I wanted to do so with that in mind. It's important to define our terms, right? And so, by the way, this could be part one of like a 10-part episode, frankly, because there are lots and lots of reasons out there. The three that I think were important to talk about today, and we'll kind of get to them in sequence, but one was going to be fear of failure, right?
Absolutely.
Probably one of the most obvious ones, that initial fear of taking the leap. And number two was going to be lack of that, say, instant success. And this is a big one, especially in today's world. And then the third one was going to be getting into the lack of support, the lack of, say, maybe mentors, the lack of that social safety net, if you will. And so those are the three things I think, for me, were going to be interesting to talk about. What about you, Phil? What are your thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly. I like the fact that you even highlighted on going to the movies, because it does give you that opportunity to really experience something vicariously, and you're not investing anything of your own.
Sure.
You get to see, everything go from the beginning of the story to the end. You get to see their hopes and their dreams come to fruition, and you get to get that little dopamine hit from what they're experiencing without any of your own personal loss.
Sure.
And I think that first topic, the fear of failure, is such a pivotal one, because it can prevent people from getting started in the first place, or maybe they have taken the first few steps and they've hit some roadblocks, and just the fear of having to lose again prevents them from going any further.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I watched, when I was, was it maybe a teenager? Gone in 60 Seconds, the movie with Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie, back before, I don't think she was quite as famous back then. Maybe she was, but first role that I remember her in, I walked out of the theater and I thought, man, I want to go boost cars, right? Like, how do I boost a car? And
that's going to fall under the fantasy realm, I think.
And that was absolutely a fantasy, because then as I started to think about, well, I could go to jail, and then I really don't even know how to do it. And turns out, but this is, movies have they have the ability to move us, right? To influence us, but in that fantasy realm. And now that's not to say though that we've never maybe say been to a show, a concert, a sporting event, and someone left there with that burning desire to say, hey, this is what I want to do, and I know I want to do it, and I know it's hard, and I know it's going to be challenging, and I know I'm going to hit all these roadblocks, but I'm going to do it. And that, again, that is where that fantasy now becomes that dream, and then that dream now has really given way to goals. And that is the key here. So back to fear of failure, right? And you're right. It's that jumping point typically. Like, am I willing to take that leap? And all of the worst case scenarios are running through our minds, right? Like, and that's typical. But those who persevere, they recognize that those things are noise. Right. Those are distractions on the path towards where I want to be. Right. Are you able to sacrifice where you are today to become what you want to be or need to be in the future. And I think this show is an example of that. You know, this idea came a year ago or so as we started talking about launching this thing, and it was a dream, right? This is something that we have wanted to do. We talked about doing. How do we do it, right? And there were obviously obstacles, right? Learning how to operate equipment, acquiring the equipment.
Deal with the lighting, deal with the editing.
Exactly. All of those variables that go into this, and you know, to be here a year later actually doing it is extremely rewarding. And look, this podcast could get watched by two people, my parents and your parents, right? And maybe that's it. But that's still a goal and an objective that was met. And that has transcended us into something different. We are at a different place than we started. And that has now opened up that landscape to other opportunities. I think, that's the key here. And when it comes to the fear of failure, right? So I think at the end of the day, right, we hope you're watching this because you want a little bit of advice maybe. This is very important. Never, ever underestimate the value of failure, right? Let me say that again because it sounds weird.
It does, but it's so true.
But it's true. Never underestimate the value of failure. Failure provides immediate feedback, right? It provides immediate information about what we're doing. Now, how can we maybe reframe that though? Instead of saying, what did I do wrong, right? What's wrong with me? I clearly did something wrong. No. That's not how we want you looking at it. It's, okay, why didn't this work, right? Very different context. We had the expectation that this was going to work, and it didn't. Why? Why didn't it work? Was it something in the medical world? We use these things called biostatistics and things like sensitivity, specificity, and all these terms that help us determine, say, the accuracy and the effectiveness of testing and all that. But as we evaluate and interpret data, there's also these markers of something called the p-value, meaning what's the likelihood that the outcome of, say, a study could have happened by chance, for example. As we analyze where we are or our quote our failures or our setbacks, is this something that was expected? Is this something that was unexpected? We just happened to misinterpret the information, and all of those questions are going to make you better. I know you know this, and if you watch long enough, you'll probably learn that I'm a big Kentucky Wildcat fan. Have been my whole life. Go Cats. And even though I'm not a huge fan of him these days, but John Calipari, the former coach of Kentucky who left and went to Arkansas, he used to say something that really, really, I really liked. And it was either we win or we learn. And now I would actually even modify that to say we learn and we learn. So you learn from a win, you learn from a loss. But the idea being that when you succeed, great. When you don't succeed, great, because I learned. I used to say this too when I was a resident, working in the hospital. And when you're a resident, your textbook knowledge is high, but your real world application knowledge is low, right? It's all because you're seeing everything for the first time live. You read about it, and you read about it in detail, and maybe you saw someone else address it, but you're addressing all these things now for the first time. And actually, it used to excite me when something would come in the door that I had never seen before, because it not that I was excited that somebody was sick or suffering. I mean, I hope that's obvious that was not the reason, but I was excited that I got to learn, right? Because
something different that you hadn't seen before.
Exactly, and I got to then take that and make it mine. I got to own it now, and that piece was now in me and in my knowledge bank. And I was going to be able to recognize that moving forward. And so, again, don't underestimate the value of a setback.
It's such a larger learning tool that people don't take an awareness of because of the sting of failure. It honestly, it burns the pride, and it's understandable why it's not desirable. But the best thing about failure is the ability to learn the different aspects of it so that you can prevent that kind of thing from happening. If it's a mistake, you can say, okay, I see where this went wrong, and then you take a different avenue.
For sure.
Because, I try telling my kids this all the time, going forward, not having any kind of obstructions or difficulties. Yeah, it's a fun, easy ride, but it doesn't develop you. It doesn't strengthen you. It doesn't build, that resistance isn't there to build up, the muscle memory and the strength and endurance
For sure.
that you would need to get through certain situations. So I think, like you said, it's a great opportunity to learn from something from that failure and move forward.
Yeah, I think you have to let it be constructive, not destructive, right?
Correct.
And I think that's exactly the point. I think, and like you're talking about with our children, right? When when I'm helping my kids with their math, and I'm fearful for the moment that their math reaches a level that I'm no longer able to understand.
My kids have already gotten there.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think mine have too, to an extent, certain things certainly, but one of the things that they say, and I try to rephrase it for them, is they'll say, I don't know how to do it. I don't get it. And I'll say, you don't get it yet.
Right.
Right? Yet. But you will. And that's the key. And that doesn't mean you can't take a step back and walk away. We all need to sometimes. Clear our head. I mean, I remember when I used to be, when I was in college and I was in organic chemistry. Organic chemistry, for those of you who don't know, that's sort of they call it the weed out class. That's sort of the course in college that a lot of aspiring doctors end up changing their career path because organic chem is just that difficult. And I would agree in sentiment that it was very difficult. But I remember I would just I would spend hours analyzing one problem, and the block would come there, and because when you're thinking of it in one singular way and you're not getting it, it's hard for you to take that pivot, and take that roundabout way because you're just so focused on that one issue. But I can't tell you how many times I would walk away, sleep on it even, and then come back the next day, and within 5 minutes it's like, okay, wait a minute. I didn't see it before, but now I do. And so don't be afraid to take that step back. If you're getting too deep into it, take a step, go for a walk, go exercise, right? Do something healthy, sleep, drink water, do anything, come back to it. Don't let that frustration carry over, and certainly don't let it affect relationships too, because that's another thing we'll sometimes see, as people are in that boiler, feeling the pressure of, and that fear of failure. It's easy to lash out, and I've certainly been guilty of that, and that, I guess, maybe not quite the topic of today's discussion, but just be mindful of those things.
It's a good point to mention, and don't forget to watch our ADHD show. That was a great topic.
Absolutely.
Now, another one that I think is huge is the lack of instant gratification, because that's, as humans, we need that surge of dopamine to really compel us to move forward with something, and we need something to just work right off the bat.
Yeah.
And that was a big problem for me with the idea of pursuing any kind of voiceover work.
Sure.
I had gone to a studio and I had done some recordings of things just literally 2 weeks before my daughter was born. And at that point, once I met her for the first time, and planning the rest of life, it was one of those situations to where I had talked to some people about what needed to happen in order to kind of get involved in that type of work. And it's like, well, if this doesn't pan out instantly right away, I've got a family I've got to support. I've got to put their focus. And so the fact that I didn't feel like I could just jump automatically into a role and just kind of, life would be easy because I jumped right into what I really wanted to do, what I felt like I would fit into.
Sure.
And because of the fact that I wouldn't get that instant gratification, instant success, I was deterred, and I let it kind of, be put on the back burner.
So yeah, and I think you highlight something that's important, because there are certainly going to be things that we face in our life that are maybe non-negotiable, right? You know, the necessity to raise and support a family, and if my dream here today was to say, go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I'd have to, I certainly would have to take into account all of the other obligations of my life into, I'd have to factor that in. And by the way,
Sure.
if that's your dream, go for it. Start training tomorrow. But I think that's part of kind of how we start talking about that need for, say, instant success. And let me give you an example too, how in my own practice where I've seen this. You may be aware of this, the app called MyChart. Are you familiar with MyChart?
Absolutely.
So, I think most health systems have a MyChart or their own version of MyChart. No, ours certainly doesn't. And MyChart is both the single greatest thing and potentially the worst thing ever. Like most things in life, right? They
Sure.
have their good and their bad. But MyChart has made life way easier from, say, a convenience perspective, right? Your ability to go on and schedule appointments and, see your labs and then, of course, message your doctor. Has made life a whole lot easier, but it has created some significant challenges. And one that I actually witnessed, this was sort of that need for, say, instant gratification. So I guess I'll give you a little backstory first.
Okay.
Some people may not be aware of this. So when you send your provider a message through the MyChart app, that message does not actually directly go to your provider, as, say, like a text message or an email would. Or at least it doesn't in ours, and I'm pretty confident 99% of other health systems it's the same. Those messages go into a pool, a sea of messages that every provider in that practice has received. And that pool is actually mined by the nurses. So the nurses and the care team, they'll come in, and part of their role throughout the day, where, aside from, say, calling patients and rooming patients and all the things that go along with being a nurse, part of that is actually mining through those messages, because a good majority can actually be addressed without necessarily reaching the doctor. Some might be, hey, I need a refill of this. And so the nurses can get that refill queued up, sent over to the doctor in a different format. One may be, hey, what am I due for my next physical, right? What am I due for my mammogram?
Sure.
And those questions a lot of times can be answered without necessarily reaching the doctor. So that'll be done. Well, messages that go beyond, say, that require the physician to weigh in are going to then get sent to the physician. Well, and if you go to send a message, generally speaking, there's going to be disclaimers all over the place that tell you this. I know ours does, but to be fair, nobody hardly reads disclaimers. I know I tend to gloss over them, when I'm signing up for, say, a trial of whatever TV service, right? I didn't quite read that if I didn't cancel within, 2 hours and 13
Sure.
seconds, I'm going to get billed for the year or something. So I don't always read them, but these disclaimers do exist for that reason. They tell people that this is not necessarily not to be used for, say, emergencies, right? You should never be sending a message that you're having chest pain or something. But anyway, so the story goes, it was a Friday evening. This was during kind of the peak of COVID, or 2020 kind of COVID hysteria, and a message came in at about 5:45 on a Friday evening from a patient of mine, letting me know that they had COVID and asking me what they should do. Essentially, it's like, what do I need? What do I need to do? Well, at 5 o'clock on Friday, the office is closed, and so there's not even a nurse in the office to even look
Address
at this
it right
pool
there.
of messages. And so that message sat there from Friday evening, and then come Monday morning when the nurses are going to get into this pool. Well, by that time, this patient had become very upset that they had sent me this message that they had COVID and they hadn't heard back. Right? They felt like they were being ignored, right? Or that
Sure.
their concerns were not important to us. When in reality, it was just nobody saw the message, because to be frank, it was not an appropriate way to try to communicate that. But they were unaware of that. And so by the time that we came in on that Monday morning, I think this particular patient had sent 3 or 4 additional messages, getting increasingly angry in those messages, And
frustration building each message.
Exactly. And then by the last one is something along the lines of, I'm going to change doctors because I need a doctor who cares and who will listen to me and all those things. And obviously I was upset for the patient because I can imagine if you thought that I was aware of this and that simply just didn't care, well then, yeah, I could understand being frustrated. But quite obviously and clearly that was not the case. Now, this is sort of an abstract example of because they didn't receive that instant response, right? They hadn't have that instant attachment or attention, I should say, to the concern. That escalation was building over the weekend, and then of course the fallout was what you could see. But if you think about it, that's the world we live in. We live in a world where anything you need for your house, you can go on Amazon right now, and it will be here between 5 and 10 p.m. or at the very latest tomorrow, right? If I want groceries, I can go on the Kroger app, put in those, and within 2 hours, someone will deliver them to my doorstep. I don't have to say hi to them. Whatever food I want, right? It could be any cuisine. I can go on DoorDash or Uber Eats, and it's there within 30 minutes. So we live in this world of instant gratification. Now, when it comes to hopes and dreams and goals, these things, they don't have an app, right? They don't have, Amazon's not delivering that. And so we have to reframe sometimes the way that we're approaching this to recognize that. Because if not, then you will get consumed and you will realize that, or you will find yourself on the outside staring back in on what was a very valid dream.
I think it's very important to be able to understand what dreams that you have that you really want to see through, that you can work beyond that instant gratification. And I think that kind of helps differentiate what's the dreams and what's the fantasies. Because the fantasies is something, like, hey, if I can't get it right now, cool. Then that's a back burner deal. That's not something I'm needing to concern myself with. But I do love to hear those stories of the folks of perseverance. The musician that played and may have gone under the radar for years. I don't know if I'm able to mention this individual or not, but I'm just going to say there is a performer that my daughter is a big fan of right now, and everybody's talking, hey, is this person just popping up out of nowhere? And in fact, they've got a backlog of things that they've done for years. It's just now they're getting to the point of popularity to where they're really developing into a successful career, but it is that perseverance. They work past not getting that instant gratification, not getting that instant success and recognition, and it can happen with artists. It can happen with musicians. It can happen with athletes. It can happen with actors. A wide variety of people.
Yeah, podcasters and YouTubers too, right?
Exactly.
There's a trait that successful people possess, particularly in, say, the creative fields, which is more or less kind of what we're entering here. There's a trait that these folks will exhibit, and that is whatever it is they're doing, they're going to do it over and over and over and over again, to the point where they're going to perfect the craft, but B, they're going to reach that tipping point finally where there's that, because you're right, it is very rare that somebody will reach, say, instant stardom, right? And I think, and that's not to say that all hopes and dreams should be in the, say, field of gaining notoriety.
Sure.
I think those are the ones that become more easy to, say, share, right? People recognize that because these people become public figures, right? But maybe your dream is to lose 30 pounds. Right? Maybe your dream is to, I'm gonna start my own business. Maybe it's to start learning how to garden or to learn how to play the piano. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's something that you want to do that lights a fire in you, then you need to do it. And if you're watching this and you've been putting off any one of those things, learning a new language, traveling the seven seas, whatever it is, or maybe it is going into a creative field, trying to do something like this. Finish watching the episode first, but start right now. Open up a notebook and write it down. This is what I want to do. Okay. And maybe you start with that, but then you write down, how am I going to do it? What are the obstacles that I'm going to have to face? Because those are important. You need to know what you're facing. And then through that, you can start to develop a plan, right? And that plan is what's going to separate the dreamers and the doers, so to speak. And so, but going back to your point, yeah, for every person out there who has perceived success, and by the way, I know we're not maybe directly talking about this on this episode. If you guys are interested in this, I would love to do a part 2, part 3, part 4.
Sure.
But one thing that we're maybe not diving into is one of the things that can be a little bit of a fool's game, though, is comparing yourself to others. That is another common reason people give up on their dreams, because they're seeing someone else do it and do it, quote, better, or at least that's their perception. And then they're like, okay, I just, I'll leave it to them. So that is something that you need to be conscientious of. It doesn't mean you can't watch and learn. I mean, you can't take some things from that. But we do need to be a little bit careful there. But the point we're trying to make, though, to kind of bring this full circle, is all of these folks, though, regardless if you know their history or not, have worked and worked and worked endless hours. And they have done all of these things that we're talking about to reach that level. Again, my own personal experience here. I don't know if I've ever told you this. You know how many times I was rejected from medical school before I got accepted?
How many?
9. I was rejected 9 times from medical school before I got accepted. Or I should say I was rejected by 9 different medical schools before I received my acceptance. But I got accepted. And that was all. I don't care. 1 out of 10%. 10% were, it's a pretty low percentage, right? Was interested in what I had to offer in this field. But that doesn't matter now, because I went, I put in the work, I achieved what I wanted to achieve, and now I'm doing what I love to do. And by the way, like in the medical world, that's actually pretty common. I think it's something like less than 1% of people who apply for medical school get in, or something like that. So it's a very competitive field. But the idea is, it would have been pretty easy after those first few rejections to say, all right, it's done, I'm done. But no, that was not how I envisioned it. And so, again, just sliver of my own personal experience to throw it out there. But if you want to do something, you can absolutely do it.
I'll tell you what, I love the perseverance. I knew of some of the schools, I didn't know that it was 9 before you hit the 10th one that said, come on.
Yeah, I might have like 9 teardrops tatted on my face, like just as a constant reminder. And I don't, by the way, I don't harbor any ill will towards any of these schools. It's at the end of the day, it wasn't.
It wasn't the path that you were
malintended, right? Yeah, it's just as they're viewing, I was going to say hundreds of thousands. It wasn't hundreds of thousands of applications, but certainly thousands of applications. They're trying to pick out who they think fits, and I get it. I 100% get it. But that lack of instant gratification, that need to persevere, those are 2 things that are very, very important here. And then I think that maybe cascades into the third one here. This is a common one too. That lack of support, that lack of, or that feeling of isolation sometimes that comes with having, say, a dream that maybe doesn't align with the people around you. And that's an important one too. I was curious what your thoughts are on that.
So I'm going to be honest, this is a tough one, because I fully believe in, the support of other humans. It really helps to compel you to move forward. I see the value of, like you were mentioning before, developing a game plan, writing that game plan down. But then I also see extreme value in sharing that plan with others, so that they can help you and hold you accountable. Ask how your progress has been. Ask, is there anything that you need me to assist with to kind of get you to the next step of things? Flip side of that is, I've seen some situations to where people people don't want to watch you succeed where they're not succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not be very supportive of your success or the possibility of you achieving said success.
Yeah.
So there's going to be times to where, people are going to be the naysayers. And I know there's plenty of memes out there that tell you to succeed in secret. And I see strength in that as well. It's like that you're your own support system at that point, to where you say, you know what, I'm bound to determine I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
Because if those of us that you may have said, I've been rejected by 7, 8 schools already, there's gonna be people that are gonna be like, stop, dude. That should tell you what you need to know.
Time to phone it in.
Yeah, exactly. Time to consider going back into teaching U.S. history.
Absolutely.
But it's a very unique aspect of this part of it. It's like I believe in a social support. I believe in supporting your own strength.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that's important. You have to be careful who you share good news with, and be careful who you share bad news with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that I'm not trying to say cast aspersions on maybe relationships. Tell you that you need to cut people out of your life if they're not supportive necessarily.
Right.
That's not necessarily the message, but you learn pretty quickly who's in your corner, and you learn pretty quickly who's not. And those are the folks who, those who are not are probably those who you want to be careful with who, how much information you share with them, because there is no shortage of people who will be lining up to celebrate, your failure. And part of that is exactly what you said, frankly, sadly, a lot of times people don't want to witness others succeed, because it generally pulls out some kind of awareness of their own inadequacy, frankly. I mean, but, there's also no shortage of people out there telling you what you can and cannot do, right? What you will and will not succeed at, right? And I actually included this quote on our on the blog, so go check it out, oncallmedicine.com, shameless plug. But I read this quote, and I don't know who said it. Google's free, so I could probably find out in 2 seconds. But the quote went like this: when the story of your life is written, make sure you're holding the pen. And
I like that.
And I like it too, because so many people will try to write that story for you,
mm-hmm.
right? You'll tell them your dream, right? Your aspiration. Oh, that's
not the path I see you taking.
Don't do that. Like you're not going to make it. Mm-mm. Maybe you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. All of those things, and I've heard those things, but they're not holding the pen, right? Nor do they have to live with the decisions that you make. So take the pen back, write it down, because you are the one living with those decisions. And like I said, try to limit that, maybe the conversations surrounding those hopes and dreams with that particular with those particular people. But find mentor. I do think mentors are very, very, mm-hmm. very important. Find people, and these people are easy to spot. Have you ever been having a conversation with someone about one of your dreams or one of your goals, and you leave that conversation, you leave from that person, and you feel good, you feel energized? Find those people.
Yeah.
The people who build you up, people who maybe that's not their goal, but they understand. They understand when that twinkle in your eyes there, and they say, yeah, go for it. Surround yourself with people who pump that energy into you. But it's also helpful to find mentors in whatever field you say may be going into. And let's say you don't have anybody that you can think of, right? Maybe your family isn't, or maybe it's not that they're not supportive, but maybe they're just not super familiar with, maybe they can't provide much help outside of just, hey, yeah, go get them, Tiger.
Right, because everybody that's in your family, I mean, who in your family has the medical background that you do?
Not one. Not a single one. Yeah, I come from a very hardworking, kind of blue collar family background. My dad was a school janitor. My mom was a school lunch lady, and so the medical side was not in my life. It was not instilled into me at all. So that was hard. It was
right.
really hard navigating all that without any of that. We'll say with that specific support. Now, obviously, very supportive, and instilled that work ethic, which I think is what got me there, or through all that. But yeah, great point. We're not always going to have, it'd be great if, your parents are Hollywood actors or musicians or whatever, and you go into that field because it's all you've ever known and you grew up with that. But perhaps you want to do something that is a little bit off that beaten path from maybe what has been typical of your family lineage. So how do you find mentors? Well, college is a pretty good place to network.
Sure.
But let's say you're not in college. Let's say you're out of college. Let's say you're beyond college now. There are a lot of online platforms. So places like Reddit or other, say, message board forums. Mm-hmm. These can be really great for finding like-minded people who are trying to do exactly what you're doing. And I tell you, there is a strong sense of fraternity or sorority in finding those like-minded people. And you will find oftentimes that when you surround yourself with those people, they're all trying to build you up, just like you're trying to build them up. And you will celebrate each other's successes. And I tell you, that is a powerful weapon when it comes to maintaining that motivation required to see yourself through all those dark times.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. And I love the fact that we're mentioning not only seeking the mentors to help boost you forward, but being the type of mentor to somebody else that you wanted to see in your own life.
Yeah.
I think that is huge to kind of, pay it forward, and you're providing that support for the next person that's following in those footsteps to enable them to achieve the success or maybe even exceed what you've done.
Without question. Yeah. I think, and I think you and I would be examples of that, more than willing to help anybody who maybe is trying to launch into, maybe you want to start a podcast and you just want to know, hey, like what
do I need to do?
What equipment did you buy, right?
Yeah.
We'll list all of it if you want. I mean, we'll do our best to help on that, because I think that there's so much power and just goodness in that camaraderie
mm-hmm.
of wanting others to succeed. Obviously wanting yourself to succeed as well. Sure. I think that brings up, I guess, an important point. You do not have to extinguish somebody else's flame in order for yours to burn brighter.
Correct.
And that is, so unfortunately, kind of going back to be careful who you share bad news with, there are a lot of people who, unfortunately, who operate in this world like that. But again, thankfully, they're usually not that hard to identify. And so once you do, just,
be mindful of what you're sharing.
Of that. Exactly.
I agree. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been very informative. I love the topic. I love the fact that we can focus on a wide variety of topics, not just focusing on the medical field. I know that's super important. I know that we're going to be providing a lot of insight to a lot of things, medically speaking. But I like the idea of and the opportunities to kind of show some other aspects of things.
Sure.
And just,
sure. Because I think
help people out in those areas.
Right. Everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has
Absolutely.
Experience. And yeah, I think now that we're a handful of episodes in, I think if at this point, hopefully maybe those of you that are watching, we could start to get a little feedback on what you do want to hear. Happy to go through the bread and butter medical issues. Certainly those are probably my areas of strength, frankly, because it's what I do every day. But these conversations, I think, are also a lot of fun, and happy to keep doing them if you guys find them entertaining. Sure. And if we do want to jump in, again, let us know, because if you want to make this a part 2, I would love to make this a part 2. Go into 2 or 3 other reasons and how we can persevere.
I'd like to just be able to hear some of people's the watching folk, the listeners. I'd like to hear about some of their dreams. I'd love to hear stories of people that say, you know what, I had this dream.
Yeah,
I did have a dream. I'm not as focused on it now, but now that we've talked about it, I think I've got the momentum to start going forward with that again. I just want to hear about some of your dreams. Share your dreams with us.
Absolutely. Share your experiences, because we definitely want to hear about it.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, I think that's all we got for today, Phil. I'm Dr. Todd.
I'm Phil.
This is On Call Medicine.
Until next time, live well.